we're going to be doing a battery comparison test between the iPhone 12 mini, the iPhone 12, the 12 Pro, and 12 Pro Max. So this is pretty straightforward. Basically, what we're going to do is just let these phones run and see how long they last. Now, all four phones have been set up the exact same way. They've got the same apps installed. They've also been updated to iOS 14.2.1. And to the best of my ability, their screen brightnesses are also set as close as I could get them to about 35%. So you can see the timer going down there in the bottom right corner, and with all these phones starting at exactly 100%, we'll go ahead and get this test started. So for this test, basically what I did was just try to emulate sort of average everyday use. So jumping from various social media apps like YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter to incorporating quite a bit of gaming with Asphalt 9, PUBG, Call of Duty Mobile, Among Us. I also threw in some 4K video recording with a camera app, Google Maps usage, Safari web browsing, and periodically launched and loaded a number of the other default apps, which you might be able to pick out as the test goes by. Obviously, everyone's usage will vary throughout the day, but I felt like this was a pretty good mishmash of different stuff without trying to run the batteries as hard as I could. Now, after the first hour of use, you can see that all four phones still have more than 90% left, though the iPhone mini already has fallen a bit behind the others. And this makes sense. This super small iPhone mini does have the smallest battery inside, of course, and if you're curious, the mini has a 2227 milliamp battery inside. The regular 12 and 12 Pro have the same sized 2815 milliamp battery, and the massive 12 Pro Max obviously has the largest battery in the group at 3687 milliamps. With this test, I know the thing I was most curious about, aside from just how long the phones might last, was also how different they might be too. The battery sizes don't tell the whole story. Of course, the Pro Max has a huge display that does draw a lot of power, so that's one reason why the battery is going to be bigger on that phone, while 12 mini has an exceptionally small battery just in general for a smartphone. And we saw some battery issues on the smaller 2020 iPhone SE earlier this year, so I know some people are concerned with how this phone might hold up. But after 2 hours, while the phones continue to separate themselves a bit from one another, the difference really isn't too extreme just yet. The mini has fallen below 80%, but the rest of the lineup isn't too far behind. Now, like I said at the start of the video, I tried to get a good mix of use out of these phones. They're all running the same apps at the same time, obviously, to make things equal. But for example, if you maybe play games non-stop, you won't be getting nearly as good of battery life compared to someone who just periodically browses social media. I know for me, I'm really big on watching YouTube videos with my phone, so I probably have the YouTube app running most in this test. But at the end of the video, I'll actually show you the percentage and time breakdown of each app, so you can see, for example, how long the real usage was for everything. I feel like not a lot of people actually show that, and I think it's super valuable information. At the 3-hour mark here, this, I feel like, is where these phones really start to separate as far as where the battery percentages are at. The mini is just about to fall below 70%, the 12 and 12 Pro have 77 and 78% left, and the Pro Max is still in really good shape. It hasn't even fallen below 80% yet, which is pretty crazy. So as we go a little further into the test, one thing I noticed, which I thought was kind of interesting, is that the path to 0% doesn't always seem to be constant on these phones. To me, the first 15 to 20% seem to get used up a little quicker, and the last 10%, especially the last 5%, and even the last 1 to 2%, that almost feels like it lasts a little longer than expected. It could just be that my app usage is different throughout the different parts of the tests, but I even feel on some other phones I've had that those last few battery percentages always seem to hold out a little extra long, which is kind of nice. Let me know if that's something you've experienced too, or maybe it's just me. Checking in at the 4-hour mark here, the mini has now officially dropped below 50%. The 12 and 12 Pro are holding strong with more than 60% still, and the 12 Pro Max has only just crossed below 70%. And it was basically at this point during the test that I sort of realized just how much better the 12 Pro Max might end up being. It's really holding pretty strong so far. One other thing I do want to mention, along with the differences in battery size, there is one other factor that might contribute to a phone's longevity. Of course, all four phones are powered by the same latest A14 Bionic chip 12 Pro has separated itself a little bit at 42%, and the 12 Pro Max, after more than 6 hours of continuous use, has not even dropped below 50% yet. Now at this point in the test, this is finally where we start to see the batteries on these phones drop a little bit more quickly. After 6.5 hours, 12 mini gets the 20% notification pop-up on the screen there. After another 30 minutes or so of YouTube videos, the mini has suddenly fallen down to 15%. 12 and 12 Pro have also sort of evened out a little bit at this point too, 28%, 33% there, and the 12 Pro Max is now well below 50% at this point, but obviously still has a ways to go. With all the phones starting to approach 30, 20, and 10% left, I have to say that I think I'm most impressed with how long the 12 mini has lasted up to this point, and also with just how much life left the 12 Pro Max has. Both these phones really impressed me in different ways for sure. After just crossing the 7-hour and 20-minute mark, the 12 mini does get that 10% battery notification pop-up on the screen. And while I did switch out of PUBG and jump back into YouTube, I think you'll see what I was talking about earlier. This last 10% on the 12 mini definitely stretches quite a bit.
Do you have an aquarium? Well, so do we. In fact, we have hundreds of aquariums. I own a fish store. I've got a whole building with fish rooms filled with aquariums. I've got an 800-gallon aquarium, and all I do is pretty much aquariums. I travel the world. I bring you guys the coolest fish, fish farms, fish in the wild, experts, all of that back to the YouTube channel, and you guys get to consume it from the comfort of your own home without having to have the fish police on you. So hit that subscribe button and saddle up. You're going to get some videos coming your way, usually about 2 a week, that will take you to new realms in your aquarium hobby.
At the heart of every great change.
And in fact, it's 7 hours and 45 minutes. This is where the regular iPhone 12 gets its 20% battery notification, and the 12 mini here is still going at under 10% left. I sort of wanted to see if I could push it a bit harder, so I did even jump back into some games like Call of Duty Mobile, and finally, after just over 8 hours and 8 minutes of screen on time, the 12 mini ends up dying on us. To be honest, getting over 8 hours of screen on time under these sorts of conditions with this phone, I think is fantastic. I've seen some other battery tests with this phone producing similar results, and I don't want to jump to any conclusions yet, but to me, I feel like any sort of battery concerns on the 12 mini might not be as warranted. This phone seems to be able to last just fine. So now that we're approaching the end here, I'll speed things up just a bit more. After crossing the 9-hour mark, it's the iPhone 12 that calls it quits next. By comparison, we've got nearly 1 extra hour of screen on time versus the 12 mini here, but still a respectable showing for sure. And honestly, I think you might even be able to stretch this phone further if you aren't too big on gaming. Now, surprisingly, even though the 12 and 12 Pro were kind of close throughout the test, the 12 Pro wound up lasting a bit longer than even I expected here after the 12 died. It finally runs out of juice after another half an hour of use. That's probably the thing I least expected with this test. I didn't really think there would be much difference at all between the regular 12 and 12 Pro since the battery sizes were the same, but perhaps there is. So with 3 phones down, we're left with the 12 Pro Max. And I have to be honest, I figured that maybe this phone would cross the 10-hour mark and end up dying shortly thereafter, but I was very, very wrong. At this point, with Call of Duty Mobile running continuously here, I was almost just trying to run down the battery a little harder. I jumped onto Twitch for a little while, had some more YouTube videos playing, and after 10.5 hours, I checked back to see that we still had 6% left on this phone. And it doesn't sound like a lot. I figured it probably wouldn't make it past 11 hours, but I was wrong again. After another 30 minutes of YouTube videos and playing Asphalt 9 and Among Us and running through TikToks and Instagram and more YouTube videos, this phone blew past 11 hours and still kept going. Finally, after just over 11 hours and 18 minutes of continuous use, the 12 Pro Max finally ran out of life. And this really impressed me